All right, Tracy, it looks like we're good. All right, no. Somebody just give me a thumbs up when we're ready. All right. Thank you, everyone. I apologize for our slightly late start this evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the November business meeting of the Croton Harmon Board of Education. If you notice, we have a slightly different setup this evening. Again, we are hybrid with many of the board members in the community room this evening, but we're trying to a different setup so that it provides the community a little bit easier way to hear and see who is speaking. So with that, we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now we will move recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Can I get a second from someone?
There's lots of people on mute.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? If everyone could just unmute themselves to say aye or.
Yeah, that's on when you're speaking. Yeah.
All right. Let's just run that again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. All right. So now we will move into the president's report. So good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you to those community members who are watching us via live stream. And I'd like to use my president's report tonight to highlight some upcoming items on the calendar. Many of them are related to athletics, and also to note some recent student achievements. So I will start off with the calendar. November 12th will be our high school college symposium. It will be held virtually this year at Thursday, November 12th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And you can find the details and I believe the link for that on the calendar. Applications for the Athletic Study Committee are due on November 9th, and the first meeting will be on December 1st. And you can find the application form on the website for that. The last date for fall sports is November 14th, and then our teams will head to the regionalized championship tournament. This tournament will conclude by November 24th. We are actively planning for a successful winter athletics season. We are still awaiting guidance from the governor whether we can proceed with high-risk sports, basketball, competitive cheer, and wrestling. But winter sports are scheduled to start November 30th. However, that date could be moved to December 14th. The Mayclem tournament will be moved to later in the winter season due to the uncertainty of the winter start date and the ability to receive a commitment from teams to participate in the tournament. We are also studying other tournament format options. And lastly, we'd like to say kudos to our student athletes and coaches. The student athletes responded to the COVID-19 protocols that were put in place and went above and beyond what we could ask. We look forward to the same response from our winter, spring, and fall 2 athletes. And then to finish off my report, I would like to highlight some recent student achievements. Our Croton Harmon senior, Kirsten Lynch, is an honoree of the New York Life Foundation's Love Takes Action Award, which recognized 35 community members from across the nation embodying love taking action in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Kirsten was nominated for the award in recognition of her work with Croton-on-Hudson's Skyview Nursing Home. Jared Wasserman, who is currently a sophomore at the high school, has been selected as the inaugural Student Expose Program participant. In this role, Jared will be appointed as an honorary member of the Croton Caring Committee Board. And they're very excited to be starting this program off this year. And we're also excited to note that Croton Harmon has 2 national merit semifinalists this year, Maya Gardos and Jacob Aronson. So congratulations, Kirsten, Jared, Maya, and Jacob. And that concludes my president's report. And so after that, with that, we will move on to hearing of the public. Do we have any members in the community room this evening? Okay, and did not receive any emails today, so we will conclude hearing of the public. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. O'Connell for her superintendent's report.
Well, good evening. Good evening to the board and our viewing public. I have some, is it Andrea? Maybe is yours on?
Oh, hold on. I'm seeing mute on everybody.
There's got to be a microphone in the room.
Sorry about that.
Turn off your.
Which one?
F10 for you?
Oh,
That's it.
So sorry.
No worries, no
Oh,
worries.
thank you. I'm so sorry, Debbie.
That's okay.
Okay.
Good evening to the board and our viewing public. I have a few things to address this evening. First is the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee. As the board may recall, I have 2 committees, one at PVC and one at CHHS. I have about 17 students at PVC and 19 at the high school. So last week I met with our PVC group and this week our high school group. This is a really wonderful opportunity to hear what's on students' minds. And I must say, they're never shy to share what they're thinking about. But I want to just share a little bit about the high school. And what was exciting about the high school meeting this week was that they were able to see that the conversations they had with me last year really started to show up and result in actions. One of those being the community conversation on equity and inclusion. And the other piece was Mrs. Duback and I shared with them the board goals. And what they saw in your board goals were directly linked to some of the conversations we were having. So for me, it was like a powerful moment to see how they were noting the connections between what goes on in a building and the conversations we're having and how they become part of larger things. So it was really very, very exciting. So I'm just going to pause for a second. Tracy, everybody can hear me and all? And how about everyone on Zoom there? Great, wonderful. The next piece that I'd like to connect with is the community conversation on equity and inclusion. Thrilled is an understatement of our community meeting that we had over 80 participants. Natalie Zwerger facilitation created an open tone which enabled community members to freely share. I am happy to report that Natalie met with students at the high school this week. So again, I want you to see the interconnection or internet connectivity between the conversations we're having on a board level, administrative level, building level, and with students. So Natalie met with a group of students this week. Principal Duback shared that they came up with some really great student-led ideas that they're working on to kickstart the conversations about anti-racism and the student experience at the high school between students and staff. So I know for one, I can't wait to hear more about these in the coming weeks. I'm also looking forward to seeing the interest level in our equity stakeholder team. So I'll pause for a second and ask John if you would share a little bit about the equity stakeholder team.
It would be my pleasure, Dr. O'Connell. So as Dr. O'Connell just said, we are so excited about this beginning of our work that was launched through board goals and continues through all of the efforts and beliefs and commitments we have at the district building and classroom level. So the question is, after that rich dialogue from October 28th, how do we formally launch this work? And as Dr. O'Connell stated, we are forming an equity stakeholder team. This will be a group of people that will review and analyze our policies, practices, and beliefs to ensure that everything that we do here in Croton Harmon are supportive of an inclusive and equitable educational experience for everyone, students, parents, staff. This stakeholder group will be made up of district and school leaders, board members, educators and staff, students, families, alumni, and community members. We will meet as an equity stakeholder team the first Tuesdays of the month from December through June from 3:15 to 5:15 p.m. And we ask anybody who is in our community who is interested in being considered as part of the Croton Harmony Equity Stakeholder Team to fill out a very, very brief application form, which can be found on our website. And we ask that those applications be submitted no later than November 10th. And we will be announcing members of the Croton Harmon Equity Stakeholder Team on November 20th, and then look forward to our very first meeting that first Tuesday in December.
Thank you. My next piece is on thought exchange. Reflection is an important part of our reentry plan. In October, we engaged the community and students in a thought exchange relative to the opening of schools. So John, would you like to share some of the information that we're gleaning from that work?
Sure. Once again, to remind our community and our board, Thought Exchange is really a wonderful open-ended tool that allows us to ask open-ended questions and then really hear not only meaningful feedback from any constituency group to whom we address a thought exchange, but also through a rating of thoughts, really get to assess what are the thoughts that are stated that really resonate with everybody, so that we can really take special note of the feelings of our community. So we launched a thought exchange on the second week of October that asks the open-ended question, what are the biggest challenges you are seeing or experiencing with remote or hybrid learning, and what is working well? We had that open for a couple of weeks, and afterwards we're able to do a little post analytics. Part of the post analytics of those thoughts are grouping them into themes. And what I'd like to do this evening is basically share the themes that arose from the parent group and from the student group, and then just give you a sampling of thoughts from each theme to sort of highlight the flavor of what was commented in. So when we were looking at the parent report, the top 4 themes that surfaced was the whole idea of learning through remote means. There was another category of health and wellness, a third category of standardization and how well we are able to standardize students' experiences across the board. And then nicely, one of the top themes was one of appreciation. So just to give you a quick flavor, and I'm going to quote directly verbatim some of the thoughts that were in the thought exchange. When it came down to learning remotely, It was nice to hear a direct comment in the top comments that said the teachers have shown remarkable patience and understanding about all of the remote challenges. With regards to challenges under the theme of health and wellness, we heard from parents that one of our biggest challenge is the screen time, how more physical activity is needed. The kids are either sitting at their desk in school or at home, and they're not moving around enough. They need to move their bodies during the day. To give you a flavor of the theme of standardization and the kinds of things that surface there, there needs to be more standardization as where students can find links. Links can appear in Google Classrooms, email, teacher websites. It's too confusing and frustrating for students to search. And then with regards to appreciation, it was nice to hear comments such as the district clearly cares. It is very clear that the district has the best intention and is doing everything possible to make this work. We appreciate all the time and effort the administration, teachers, custodians, and support staff have poured into this. I'm going to just move on to students and some of the themes that we heard. Some of the common strands that we heard from student reports were learning experience, health and wellness also surfaced as the second most popular theme, screen time, interactions between students and teachers, and technology. And just to give you a quick sampling, which we heard from our students, learning experience. Some of the biggest challenges include staying focused for the full 70 minutes of the class and being able to have a good Wi-Fi all the time. I wish there was a mix of asynchronous work and Zoom, not just Zoom for 6 hours. Within the theme of health and wellness, I find by the end of the day, I'm really tired and I can't pay attention. I get at least 8 hours of sleep a night, so it's not that I'm sleep deprived. Loneliness, for those that are fully remote, such as myself, I miss being able to be near friends and feeling like everything is going to be all right. Screen time, sitting in front of a computer all day is exhausting. I don't like the synchronous lessons as a fully remote learner. They're tiring. Student-teacher interaction. It's much more difficult to interact and learn when you are all remote. Making a connection with teachers and being able to get personal help is really difficult. And then technology. Zoom gets glitchy. Zoom gets glitchy sometimes, and it makes it hard to hear what students are asking or what teachers are answering, and you might miss instructions. So I hope you can hear from this small sampling of the hundreds of thoughts that we got that there is valuable information that we are receiving. This kind of feedback is a real gift. We are able to use this to either justify a lot of the things that we are doing. When it comes down to hearing things like loneliness, it makes us feel very, very happy that we are responding with things like the SEL survey, which is being launched very, very shortly. This kind of feedback has been shared with all of our administrators at the administrative council level so that we really could start analyzing it, make meaning from it, figure out those important next steps that we need to really take a look at the experiences of our parents and students and do the important work of working with our faculty to really figure out the next steps in making this whole situation better for our students.
John, if I may, and I hope I have the correct microphone on.
Neil, I can't hear you.
Guys, we can't hear you at all.
Neil, you're on mute.
So what I was, as I described what we discussed at Building Planning Council, a lot of what you discussed today really kind of dovetails with the discussion that we had at Building Planning Council. And I would hope or suggest that if you could share this in sufficient detail, I mean, it probably already has, to Laura and to Mark, so that as they develop their questions for students, they don't duplicate what you've done, or there are no gaps. And so I just throw that out for your consideration.
Thank you, Neil. And that is part of the bigger picture. So, and the building principals do have these data. Thank you, John.
Debbie, I just had a quick.
We can look very shortly.
Oh, I thought I did.
I'm sorry, could you repeat Iris's question? We didn't hear it.
So I'm going to move on, but John will look that up by going into the survey. Okay. The next piece in my report is about the athletic committee that you may have seen in the K-12 alert that went out. The committee is objectively going to examine all aspects of the present athletic program to determine alignment with the standards of excellence and best practices in the administration of an education-based athletic program. And they will examine the following areas: philosophy and policies, measures of education compatibility, mentoring to enhance leadership among coaches and student athletes, program safety and risk management, program access and equity, organizational systems, budget and supplemental fundraising, personnel and program assessment, technology, and sports medicine. So this is launching for this year. And if interested in serving, there's an application that was sent out in the K-12 alert. And please submit it no later than November 9th.
And I could just get back to you with the thought exchange. And engaging in 5,954 ratings. And the student had 126 participants sharing 101 thoughts with 1,593 ratings.
My next piece of my report is just a reminder about our bus electrification task force. Our first task force meeting will be held on November 19th. During this meeting, we will review our charge and report out on our work in this area to date. Since the number of interested people was around 20, and that's what we were looking for, we invited all those who completed the interest survey to join us. So I'm really looking forward to our first meeting, and certainly we'll have more to report out as we move through. The next part of my report is switching to remote and hybrid choices in January. As we discussed in our reentry plan, we shared that parents would have an option based on the comfort level to change their students' learning model. Whereas a change is easier in PVC and the high school based on how those learning models are structured, we know there are different implications for CET. So John, would you share some of the discussion and planning that has been occurring over time and share?
With pleasure. As originally stated in our reopening plan, we are now providing families at CET with the opportunity to reflect upon and change their child's selected learning mode, whether hybrid or remote. So parents who would like to request a change in their child's learning model will receive an invitation this coming Monday of next week, next Monday, to complete a survey. They'll have, basically 2 weeks. We're going to ask that those surveys be returned on Friday, December 4th. If we don't hear from a family by this date, it will be noted that that family is not requesting a change. Then after December 4th, the administration and teachers at CET will meet review those survey results, and really consider the implications that those will have on grade level configurations. As we all know, there's still a requirement for us to follow all the requirements of the pandemic that has come down to us from Governor Cuomo, State Ed, and the New York State Department of Health. So obviously, we are going to be looking at how we're able to accommodate all those changes while taking everything into consideration about social distancing and class size. So as we analyze the data, we will have to look at how this information is going to be used to basically make the best decision for our children's. We have a realization that there is the potential that it could impact class placement. Of course, we're going to do everything possible to cause the least disruption to the current classroom configurations at CET. And ultimately, we'll be communicating the results of this process by Friday, December 18th, so that all changes can be implemented upon students' return from the December recess on January 4th, 2021.
Thank you, John. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk a little more about yellow, orange, and red zones. I think people have been hearing about this in the news lately. So I'm going to first start off with just talking a little bit about the metric. And then I'm going to ask John, who attended the most recent meeting with the New York State Department of Health on zones. So we hear a lot about the zones in the news as a yellow, orange, and red. In Westchester, we are considered to be in tier 1. And again, what that means is by the metric, certain numbers apply. The target metric for entering what's called the yellow precautionary zone, 2 parts to it. A geographic area has to have a 7-day rolling average positivity above 2.5% for 10 days, and the geographic area has 10 or more new daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day average. At my recent COVID meeting with the regional safety folks, we were talking about we already have one of those pieces in Westchester. The geographic area has 10 or more new daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day average. So reason I bring it up is that these things have to be always in the forefront of our thinking, what that means, what zones mean, and what the implications are to our school system. So with that said, let's hear a little bit of from John on his recent meeting with the New York State Department of Health on zones. And again, the implications to schools. So John?
So with the criteria that would have us be in the yellow precautionary zone, there is no implication for school closure if we were to enter a yellow zone. There is a requirement for us to continue the symptom and exposure screening, which we are currently doing. The other quite stringent requirement once we entered yellow would be the need for us to provide COVID testing or have COVID testing performed for 20% of our in-person learning school community. That's inclusive of students and faculty and staff. So that means every week we would have to, while we were in the yellow zone, we would have to assure that 20% of our staff is tested and negative. And we would have to go through all of the required reporting to report those figures to the state on that weekly basis. Dr. O'Connell mentioned that there is also then when we get closer to a microcluster zone is basically the red zone. And then there is around the region of the microcluster something that the state is now calling an orange zone. And there are implications for school districts that are the same whether you are in a red zone or an orange zone. If we were to be denoted in one of those two zones, the first thing is that we must close our schools for at least 4 calendar days after that zone designation is announced. However, with this new regulation, it was that we would have to stay closed for a longer period of time. But with the new guidelines, we are able to reopen as early as the 5th day after the zone is designated, as long as we follow certain protocols. The first protocol would be to ensure that no staff, faculty, student is permitted to return on that 5th day or subsequent day that we decide to open without receiving a negative COVID-19 test that had to have been taken after the closure of the school. So once again, in order for schools to reopen on that 5th day or after, 100% everybody that were to return to school must be tested. They must be negative, obviously, to return. An attestation that this has taken place must be submitted to the New York State Department of Health. And part of the attestation that I was referring to earlier that must be reported through the Department of Health portal is what they're calling a line list, so that we must report each individual name, address, date of birth, result of the lab test, lab performing the test, the ordering physician, the test date of every single student, faculty member, staff member returning on campus. So that is just to reopen. Once we did reopen, there is an ongoing process that we must go through weekly to remain open. That once again includes the intensive symptom and exposure screening on a daily basis. And then once each week, any school that is in the red or orange zone that has reopened must attest that they have tested 25% of the in-school person population and provide a line list on a weekly basis to those 25% that have been tested. With regards to how that testing can occur, the schools can accept a written test result from any of the staff, faculty, or students from a healthcare provider. We can have those people's go to a test site run by New York State to have specimens collected for testing there. The schools can establish a partnership with other entities who are authorized to perform testing, or the schools can become approved to perform testing on site by attaining what's called an LSL registration. That LSL stands for Limited Service Laboratory. It would allow us as an entity to perform COVID-19 rapid testing. Once approval is granted, we would receive rapid tests from the state. We will be able to perform testing on our students, faculty, and staff. Obviously, we could not test the same 25% of our population the next week. Every week, we have to be assured that we are testing a new 25% sample so that you could do the simple math and see that by week 5, if we were still in an orange or red zone, we are now going back to our first cohort and asking them for a second negative test to return. So as I've been discussing the implications of this with peers from around the region, there is certainly a discussion on the practicality of guaranteeing that on a regular basis, if we asked our students, faculty, and staff to volunteer to bring in tests, how much we can guarantee that we would have that 25% return weekly. There's also a lot of questioning about how feasible it is to register to become an LSL. It would require that we would have a medical director that was willing to serve as the LSL director and a certified nurse that was able to act as the laboratory director. So a lot of my colleagues are quite frankly wondering if the realistic implication of being in a red zone or an orange zone might be to have to continue with remote learning while we are in those designated areas.
So I think it was very important for us to spend a few minutes on that to explain the complexity of the zones regarding school. And so you could get a flavor of the conversations that are ongoing and trying to think through the feasibility of, not being a medical organization and having those responsibilities placed upon a school. And also then the cost that's associated, whereas New York State would, from what I'm told, provide the rapid test kits, there would still be the way in which to administer all of that. And if we did it through a third party, there would certainly be costs associated with that, I'm sure. So we are still carrying on conversations, as John said, with his colleagues, with the assistant superintendents, the personnel directors, et cetera. The superintendents are continuing the conversation. So we wanted to take tonight just a few minutes to keep the board abreast of the types of dialogue and conversation that's ongoing in the field relative to COVID positivity rates and zones.
Josh has raised his hand.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
I'm wondering, has there been any guidance as part of the discussion with departments of health concerning the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday? And the reason I ask is because I know that, our son who is at university, many of the universities have said, if you go home for Thanksgiving, you need to stay home. And the concern is that there are a lot of families that are going to have contact with people that they don't normally have contact with under the normal course of activities. And does that present an additional risk to the school for transmission of disease in the immediate week after Thanksgiving? And I'm wondering if there's been any guidance about what schools should do about this, and whether it might make sense for us to add a couple of days remote immediately after the Thanksgiving holiday.
So yes, there's been a lot of conversation more on our level of educators versus any guidance we've received out of New York State. We've posed the question several times, should we be preemptively closing school? Again, there's no official statement from the Department of Health, so I don't want to speak for the Department of Health. But any of the conversations we have had with, our COVID coordinator meetings, et cetera, it's not sounding like that should be done preemptively. And the timelines are even further out so that you would, John, do you remember how they said it? The timeline was so far out that you'd be then closing for Christmas and then after Christmas, et cetera. There is a thought that if schools were remote, people would remain away longer and then perhaps not return. And we would be up against the same type of issue as before. These are things I'm just sharing with you from the field and the conversation. We asked my organization of superintendents have posed it up higher to see if somebody would come and give us a definitive statement as to whether it is something we should be doing or not. And we have not received anything at this point. I think the travel language that just came out, which I believe is one of our items to share tonight as well, would help in this situation, but nothing definitive has come out from State Department of Health or Westchester County Department of Health relative to the Thanksgiving holiday, besides the travel that we'll talk about in a minute. So I'm going to continue. Let's go right to travel then, since that's a natural segue. John, if you would share some of the recent Department of Health information that came out relative to that?
So the pre-existing guidance remains, and that guidance states that anybody who's traveling outside of New York State to a state that is not a contiguous state and then returning has to quarantine for a period of 14 days. However, a recent regulation has changed. Not really changed. The quarantine period is still in exist, but there is a way to forego those 14 days of quarantine. And the two stipulations are that if you were traveling outside of New York State, and this is for anybody traveling for more than 24 hours, if you obtain testing within 72 hours prior to your arrival back in New York, and then when you get back to New York, you quarantine for a minimum of 3 days, and on the 4th day, get a diagnostic test, and both of your tests from before you returned to New York, and then when you get on day 4 is also negative, that you do not have to go through the 14 days, and you are able to exit quarantine upon receipt of the second negative test result. This does not apply, once again, to contiguous states, which are deemed as Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. So travelers from these states are not subject to this guidance. And if you do not, once again, go through this process of the test 72 hours prior to arrival in New York and a second test on day 4 upon your return, then you are deemed having to go through the 14-day quarantine.
So that was a nice connection to that. I think I'd also like to just share, which is just, from my heart, that when we started out with our reentry plans, we kept focusing in on this is a community effort. We need to come together as a community. We need to work together to mitigate the spread. We need to join together in strength and solidarity to help combat the virus in our Croton community. So I mentioned earlier, I was with the students this week, and one of the questions we asked is, always what's going well, right? And they had numerous things, but one of the things that stuck in my head was the mask wearing in schools. It's going really well. And I was so proud, right? So then, we continued the conversation and I probed a little and I said, I do get an occasional email to tell me that perhaps people aren't wearing masks in town. So I made them laugh. I said, because I do walk around town, and when I show up, people all of a sudden put their masks on. I said, I don't know. It's like magic. I said, but what is it we can all be doing that beyond the school day, that these things happen? And I think they're looking to the adults to help them as well. I mean, they didn't come out and say, I'm looking for your help, but I could feel it. They're looking for the help. And like I said, well, sometimes I hear that there might be parties. I don't have any evidence. And again, for some reason, I'm not invited to the party, but you might be. So where are our voices and how can we together work on this? But I understand that's a lot on the shoulders of a teenager. But how is it as a community? We can, if we hear that there's going to be a party or a gathering, are we being careful? Are we socially distanced? Are we wearing masks, etc.? So again, from my heart, this is a community effort that goes on 24 hours a day. We all need to be working together. So thank you for indulging me that time, but our kids need our help in beyond the school day on how we can make those good choices.
Did you want to speak?
Sure. Did you want to?
No, I was, Debbie covered, it was about, well, since I did raise my hand, when I was on Westchester Putnam School Board call, there were a couple of districts that were planning to close the week after Thanksgiving preemptively, not, I keep saying schools still in sessions, you're not closing school, it's just going remote during that week. So
We,
some schools are considering it.
yes, we have been discussing that. Some schools have vacillated, yes, no. So I don't know where everyone will land. It is a question we continue to ask each other. And it is a question we keep asking because things keep changing, right? So how I feel, 3 weeks ago might not be how we feel as we move closer. So I think that's an important piece as well. So you're right, Andrea, it is a conversation that on the superintendent level that we continue to have. I was hoping if in fact that was a sound decision from the Department of Health perspective, that they would be sharing that. And thus far, nothing on that, but thank you for sharing that.
If someone's speaking, I can't hear you. Hello?
We can't hear.
I was so good about unmuting, pardon me. So I'll start because it was riveting beginning. So as the board might recall, New York State Ed established a 1-year pilot to enable school districts to move to remote in case there was inclement weather due to snow. And it's a pilot just for the 2021 school year. I want to share our thoughts to date. So we have discussed this with the teachers and the administrative team, our liaison group, and just some thinking. So if you recall last year, on one of our half days, we have so few half days, on one of the half days in December, we needed a 2-hour delay due to inclement weather. Being that it was on the half day, I wasn't going to bring students in for 2 hours late and then send them home an hour early. So unfortunately, we had to call it a snow day. On a day like that, we have 3 half days coming up, the one before Thanksgiving, another one in December, and then another one in March. On a day like that, a half day where it's either a half day or it's a professional development day, whatever it is, should there be an inclement weather need, that most likely I would call it a remote day. So we would not use a snow day. Setting those days aside, if we have, let's just take it a regular other day where we would need a snow day, and it's just normal, not a half day, et cetera. I would most likely be calling that a snow day. And that would be a day that we weren't remote, et cetera. As you know, we have certain number built into the calendar. If we got to a point where it was that kind of winter and we felt that we were going to start surpassing what we've already built into the calendar, I then might move it to a remote day so that we have more of a continuity of learning, et cetera. So that's kind of where we are now with the thinking of this pilot that New York State Ed is running this year. Okay. So my last piece to my report this evening is a personal note. And I'd like to close my superintendent report this evening by sharing some personal news and announce that I plan on retiring in the year 2022. In 2011, I joined our district and was given the opportunity to serve the students and community of the Croton-Harmon School District, first as an assistant superintendent and now as your superintendent. Each day has been an honor and a privilege because of our work together. As a learning community, we have put our district's mission and vision into action so that our students may see a world of possibilities. What a tremendous gift this has been. In 1985, when I first took a step into a classroom, I knew my world would be forever changed. But what I never imagined was the depth of experiences Croton Harmon would provide. I'd like to take this moment to thank you all for the opportunity to work with you and the Board of Education, the opportunity to work for you. Croton Harmon will forever hold a very, very special place in my heart. Thank you. So in using my tagline to end my superintendent's report tonight, yours in Mission Possible. Thank you.
All right, can everybody hear me now? Brian, I know you can. Can the other people in the room hear me? All right. I'm not going to say much right now regarding Dr. O'Connell's last statement there, in the interest of not getting emotional, and we have plenty of time for that later on. But I would just like to say thank you so much. Our district has been very lucky to have you steering the ship over the past couple of years. And particularly, I'm so grateful for your calm and steadfast leadership since March and all of the challenges we have faced. I've been just amazed and impressed. And we as a board, I know I can speak for everyone here, have been so grateful for your leadership. So thank you. And now we will move into our ongoing business, which is the Board of Trustee vacancy discussion that we had begun at our last work session. So during the last work session, we began to discuss our next steps regarding the vacancy, and we tabled it with the intention of resolving 3 questions tonight. And that was, should the board fill the vacancy, or should we continue with 6 trustees until the next scheduled election? 2, if the board chooses to fill the vacancy, how should we choose to do so? By appointment, special election, or by asking BOCES to act? And if the board chooses to appoint a trustee, what would that selection process be? So in regard to that, before I open it up to everyone else for discussion, I do have updated information regarding the first question. So I did speak with the district superintendent and he noted that if the board made the decision to move forward with 6 trustees and in effect not fill that vacancy until the election in May, he would not be inclined to intervene. He did though suggest that I discuss it with our council. So in my initial meetings with council, we had really focused more on the special election versus appointment. So when I followed up with Will, he did note that Education Law 1709, which discusses the powers and duties of the Board of Education, one of those powers and duties is with regard to filling a vacancy. So he did say that, if it could be perceived on a strict reading of that is a duty, thus it is something that we need to fill. But that is, again, that's becomes a risk assessment on the board's part. So that's the information that I wanted to provide to everyone with regard to that. So the district superintendent would not be inclined to intervene if we felt that we could move forward with 6 trustees until the May election, but then the additional info from Will. So at that, I will open it up to discussion from everyone. But again, we'll have to work with the raised hands so that everyone can hear everyone. So I see that Andrea has her hand raised.
I just, before we get into a deep discussion, I just would like to clarify a timeline, which is that we did not, as a board, we did not know Dr. O'Connell's decision when we were discussing this last time, because I think that is definitely something that we need to sort of consider in terms of some of our responsibilities and our workload. The other thing I just wanted to clarify, and Sarah, I'd love for you to answer this question for the public, is when are we looking for, not looking, because none of us are happy with this, with this announcement, but when would Dr. O'Connell's last day be?
Dr. O'Connell hasn't submitted an official letter. I think she was making her statement tonight. So I don't have a date for you. So I don't have a date for you there. Dr. O'Connell?
So yes, I have been considering January of 2022. And the board will have my formal letter for purposes of retirement at your December meeting.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. O'Connell. All right, does anyone have any comments, any thoughts, questions, discussions?
Iris.
Oh, Iris wanted to talk. So she needs to talk loud so we can hear her.
Okay, I'll unmute mine so she can
I
hear.
don't know, I can unmute it, but we can do. You can the mic, the desk mic, and unmute your Zoom.
No, I unmute before my, you hear the echo?
Because you have, the other people have to turn their desk mic on.
No, I think it's just my machine.
Neil, you're on.
So is it too echoey, Sarah and Brian?
I can hear you pretty well.
Okay, so I still have been going back and forth, but I kind of have settled in my mind on the direction that I'm most likely to come down on. When I was thinking this through, I kept coming back to, I understand that it's something that it is within our powers to do, and it's one of the duties that's a board can fulfill. But I kept coming back to, like, is there a felt need that we would be filling in appointing someone at this juncture? And I kept going back and forth. And every time I would weigh the things that, the pros of proceeding with appointing someone versus the con kept getting heavier and heavier. So I'll explain. For me, we just went through the summer where we were meeting once or twice a week to get the hybrid model, the remote models, to get everything gelled together so that we could open schools. That was a very, very big undertaking, but there was a big need for that. There was a reason we did that. The felt need was clear and strong. In order, when I put on the other end the appointment of a new board member, it would once again require us to put in an enormous amount of hours, an enormous amount of extra things on our plate. So to me, it had to be for a real purpose. Like, what would the purpose of going through this bring? What would the results bring? And the only thing I kept, when I went back and I watched the video, and the only thing I heard for the reason would be, well, because we don't want the community to be upset, or, well, because it's one of our duties. That's something that we can do. But do we gain anything by having gone through this exercise? Is the district in a better place? Is there something that is solved or something that needed to be done that can't get done without this seventh person? And I kept coming back to no, there isn't. And we as a board, it's not that we're a unanimous board. We work, we collaborate, we work, we talk, we discuss, we come to a decision. That doesn't mean that we, there aren't times when we have disagreements or difference of opinions, but the bringing on the seventh person would be nice, but will we just be working harder and not smarter in this situation? If we're just working harder to fill the position, I couldn't find a reason to say, what is the reason we would be doing that? What is the felt need that this seventh person would fill at this particular time when we have so many other things that we are currently working on? We have the equity inclusion just getting off the ground. We're working on sustainability. We're all in these various committees and we're trying to get solutions and move things along. Now we're going to throw on, again, so I open it up to my fellow board members. I am leaning towards, I believe we should leave it vacant, allow the community, they will have their voice in May to select the person that they want to position into this, this seventh seat. Again, I'm not saying that we don't have the duty to do it, and duty is a weird word. I don't agree with the attorneys here. It's not that we are obligated to do this. It's not that there's a list of boards, you must do this and this and this. It's if you're in a situation where you need a seventh, you need to fill a seat, here is the power to do it. It's not an obligation. We have 3 duties: appoint a superintendent, a fiduciary responsibility, and I forget the third one. Policy. Thank you, Leah. Those are our 3 duties, and we come as a group of 7 to fulfill those duties. But this appointment was tugging at me. I'm like, what? I'd like to understand what is the felt need that we would be filling in going through the point of, we would have to meet regularly. We would have to put all of our energies into that. And what would we have to give? What would have to fall by the wayside in order for us to do that? So, and the superintendent, just to round off my ending thought, with Dr. O'Connell, I'm going to turn her to the left so I don't look in her eyes. The community, especially having gone through the process of the superintendent selection, it's highly unlikely that we're going to be taking any steps of actions before May. So the new person that would be elected would be coming in at the time we would be starting that process, right? Or getting our feet under us and starting to lay it out. So it's not like, okay, so we're going to collude and put together the process and then exclude the community in that aspect of it. So it doesn't really alter for me the fact that I believe the community should really, let's leave this for the community to decide, since there is no felt need that we have to address.
So Josh and then Andrea for hand raising.
So thank you, Iris. I feel similarly to Iris on this. The one thing that is a little bit, what I was thinking about that led me to that thought process, though, was a little bit different. I was thinking about the how we would, if we were going to select someone, how would we do it? And we had, as we said, we had 2 choices. One was for the board to conduct interviews or some sort of selection process ourselves, or to have a special election. And then I started to look at the amount of time between now and May and all the things that are on our plate to do in that time. And I started thinking about the effort that was involved in that. And I began to think that the only way that we could do it that was effective, that would not detract from all of the other responsibilities that we as a board and we as a district have, would be to have a special election. Then I thought about the cost of that special election and the amount of time it would take for that special election to take place, looking at what the timelines would be and when the holidays were. And I realized that we probably wouldn't be able to actually hold the special election until perhaps February or March. And if that's the case, well, then it strikes me that that only buys 2 months versus the regular May election date. And so I argue with sticking with 6 until the regular May election date. I think that is I think that our public will understand, and I think it will prevent us from a situation which is equally fraught with our public, which is for us to select someone and then receive complaint that I have a sense that no matter who we would pick, somebody would be upset about it. That avoids that situation as well.
Andrea?
So I'm in agreement to a certain extent with Iris and Josh. In fact, I am in agreement with them that that would be the simplest and cleanest thing for our district. But I was trying to think through, if we decide that it really is our duty to have a 7th member, I was trying to think about a way how we could do that and take the burden off of us. So I don't know if this is possible, but I do have a lot of faith in our BOCES team, our BOCES, BOCES support services. They've run a lot of community forums for us. I was wondering if it would be possible for them to do some kind of focus groups, have some sort of, take this off of our plate, because again, I really am in agreement with Iris. We have some really exciting goals this year. I don't want to get sidelined by, picking somebody that the district, people in the district are not going to be happy about, because it's not, no matter what we do, it's not going to be 100% reflection of the community. So I'm wondering if BOCES could get involved, do some of the work for us, make some recommendations, and then we could appoint somebody. I'm just throwing that out as an idea. I haven't checked it. I was just trying to do some problem solving.
Neil, looks like you have your hand raised.
Unmute? Yes, thank you. I've been tossing this back and forth as well, and I'm in agreement with the conclusion that Iris and Josh have provided. I don't necessarily agree that the only way to go forward, or the best way to go forward, would be a special election with that timing, but I do appreciate what Josh said about this will prevent us from selecting someone that might upset one in the community. I think, however, I would not want BOCES to be involved in a process of focus groups, vetting, etc., because that's the selection of an administrator or the selection of a superintendent is very different than the selection of someone who is going to represent the community. If someone is going to represent the community, I think you must do it either through an election or a community process. As I said during our last meeting, what we could do is appoint an interim, a caretaker, and not go through any process and say, okay, we could select a former board member who knows the ropes, so to speak, and say, just fill in. You're not going to be running, right? You're not going to be running, as I described happened when vacancies occurred in the village. I don't think that really is the best way for us or to act and to act as far as our relationship with the community. But I go back to what Iris said that really sways on this subject, which is we have a lot of work to do, and we have worked very well together during the summer and beyond. The value added of someone for a very short period of time, someone is appointed in January, we are talking about 4 months, because as of the date of the election, third Tuesday in May, assuming it's not going to be delayed again, that person immediately will assume the vacancy and hold the vacancy for the next 2 years plus. So you're really talking about 4 months max. In Josh's description of a special election, 2 or 3 months. I think we are better off plowing ahead, doing our work as we have been doing. And obviously we had Beth's participation until she resigned. But I think we are better off going on with the 6 of us who are in this room, physically or virtually.
Thank you, Neil. Brian, did you want to?
Sure.
Sarah, were you saying something?
I have not really changed exactly what I would conclude we should do. Nobody can hear me? Oh, okay. I hear it say shaking heads. I'm still of the opinion that we should, have our 7th person. It does distribute the work a bit more additionally, which is considerable, even if there's a small learning curve. There's not that much of a learning curve for a lot of the stuff that we do. I also think that in our past election, the community did vote for a new perspective, which was Beth, and that has now, she had to go. And I think that I would replace that. I would want to replace that. And I would replace it with something similar, which is not a person who's been in the position before, not a person that's appointed by BOCES, because I don't know if they necessarily know what our community wants or needs, or our district wants or needs. So I would not want to go through an election because that's expensive and very time consuming. To be honest, it wouldn't bother me if we went ahead and just appointed somebody from perhaps a list of people who indicated an interest. And we could go from there. So do we need to? No, you can have a board of 6. I think that I would like to. But I understand other perspectives as well.
Andrea, you wanted to speak? You raised your hand.
So I thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I'm not saying that BOCES would select the person. That's an option. I just brought them to the table in that they could help with the vetting. I mean, the main thing we have to keep in mind is, community members have to put themselves forward. I mean, I think and I'm just going to put that out there. Are we in agreement that community members should put themselves forward, that we don't go and pick a community member? We have to wait and see if they put themselves forward. And we don't really know, Brian, you may have an idea of somebody that you like, but when push comes to shove, we don't really know who's going to sign up for this work. It's not the most glamorous work right now. I have to say, it's pretty challenging. There's a lot going on. So
this is pretty awesome, and the financial rewards are enormous.
I just wanted to clarify that I don't actually want BOCES to select the person. I would just like them to maybe work with them to maybe pick up some of the work that would be involved in doing a deep dive into the community to select someone. And I'm just not even sure that that's what I want to happen. I'm just putting that out there.
Neil?
Yes. If this is going to be a, if you will, community conversation and a decision that we are making on behalf of the community, I really don't see what BOCES will be able to add to that, because I am not going to, in considering the things that Brian talked about, bringing somebody or appointing someone who has a particular perspective, or thinking about people's different people who are interested in what their skills, attributes, etc. are, as was vetted. I would not. I don't see BOCES as doing that for us, presenting us with three names and we pick from among them. I would want to hear them. I would want to see them. I would want to be able to interact with them. As I described to you, when Brewster went through this process over the summer, they had people express interest, had a lot of people express interest. Because they had so many, the board members, the remaining 5 board members, narrowed it down to 7 finalists, and interviews were conducted with the 7 finalists. The board members got the ability to see and sense the, I should say, the strengths, attributes of each of the candidates and selected 2 from among them. Now, that's really, to my mind, in the best circumstance, something that the community does when the community has people who express an interest by filing petitions to run, or in 2020, just expressing putting in a statement of interest, and then the community judges. I think we represent the community. I think we would need to do that if we were going to be looking at a slate of candidates. But I go back to what Iris said before, which is what's the work? How much work would we have to do in that regard? And what's the value added for the functioning of this governance body over the next few months until we get to the point of having an election in May? And I don't see that. I don't see that being worth the. I don't see the value added sufficient for us to fill the vacancy.
Thank you, Neil. Iris, I did see you had your hand raised for as well. Oh, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sarah. I don't know if anybody else can.
I don't think they can yet. Okay, you can hear me now. Okay, so thank you, Iris. I saw that you had your hand raised as well. I do want to note for everyone the time. We have spent already over a little over 20 minutes talking about this. And so I wanted to just put forth my thoughts, which haven't changed appreciably from the last meeting either. I do see the benefit of having a 7th person at the table, in that, I think anyone who it does indicate interest and who wants to sit down and to be a part of all of the very many important things we have going on and will be working on through May. I think that there's a seat at the table, and that is a plus for the community. It does add another person. It's another person to help us with our work, and another person to help benefit all the stuff that we're doing for students. That said, I do understand where the other perspectives, and see where people are coming from with regard to just staying at the 6. I don't think we would be doing a disservice to the district by maintaining 6 of us until May, because we do work to collaborate and thoughtfully come to decisions. But I think there's a benefit to there being a 7th person. So with that, Iris, I will let you speak. And then from there, I would suggest that we kind of go through a thumbs up, thumbs down on that first essential question that we were coming to, which will direct whether we need to go through questions 2 and 3.
I was just going to add really briefly in connection with Brian's point. I actually agree with him a lot that the the community, I don't want to speak for the community, that a new voice was added to the community with Beth, and that's even more, that for me, that argues even more in favor for why it might be best to leave this up to the May election, because I mean, it would be great if we can expand the inclusion of our board so that we have a more representative board of different types of people that are in the community. And for something like that, we sort of need to start as board members and trying to reach across to the various different groups, because one of the things I picked up from that community conversation on equity and inclusion is just how important it is for our students to see themselves in the leadership roles in the district. And we as a board are a part of that leadership role. And so wouldn't it be great if kids saw a variety of diversity, not saying that someone would be selected just for diversity purpose, but that they're in the pool so that people can make choices. And I'm not sure if we try to rush together and put something together in 2 weeks, we would be achieving that goal. So I agree with you 100%, Brian, that new voices are a pleasure. But what new voices are we looking at? Are we really looking at new voices that are really old voices? Or are we really looking at new voices that expand our leadership diversity and bring on new ways of seeing things? So that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you, Iris. Can you guys hear me now? Okay, so from that, if everyone has had a chance to give their opinion and talk about their thoughts on this, I do think we should sort of get a read on that first question was, should we fill that vacancy or continue with the 6 trustees? So I guess I'll just do for thumbs up, thumbs down on continuing with 6 trustees. So that gets me 1, 2, 3, 4 thumbs up.
Neil, you're not allowed to do 2.
Yeah, yeah, only 1 counts. So 4 thumbs up, 2 thumbs down. So I think that has answered our question. And actually then we don't need to delve into questions 2 and 3. So at this point, the board has decided that we will continue with 6 trustees until the May election. And I would like, I would hope all of us will go out and try to encourage our community members to step into this role. Talk to any community members who are thinking about joining the board and get some new perspectives on here. That would be great. Andrea.
Mute.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, then I will move us on to the next part of the meeting, because we still are in new business, or we're now moving to new business. So recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agreement between the Croton-Harmon Union Free School District and DSG Decision Support Group to provide operational and technical expertise and resources for the Croton-Harmon Transportation Fleet Electrification Initiative at a cost not to exceed $18,000 starting November 2020 through February 2021.
So moved.
Second,
On the question?
I just want to say that I'm very thankful to the Assistant Superintendent for Business in having negotiated this agreement through its various iterations to something which is much more appropriate and acceptable to our district's needs from the first proposal that came, I guess it was a couple of months ago. And I think that tied in with the task force that Dr. O'Connell spoke about, they should, I hope, be very a great resource to get us where we need to go sustainably. And I use that word as a pun only a little bit, sustainable, sustainably both economically, financially that is, and with regard to our environmental footprint.
Okay, all in favor?
Thank you.
Aye. Oppose, abstain? Motion carries. All right, so now we will move on to some policy first readings. We have a first reading. Board of Education will conduct a first reading of the following policies. 6,000 fiscal management goals, which is a revision. 6110 budget planning, which is a revision. 6110R budget planning regulation, which is a new policy. And 6200 revenue, which is a revision. Neil, did you want to make a brief statement with regard
Sure.
to these?
Very briefly, on October 16th, I believe it was, the policy committee met and went through some of the fiscal policies. We didn't get through all of them. The ones that you have here for first reading are pretty much self-explanatory. If there's any questions, come back to me and the rest of the policy committee with them. I will also say, even though to save some time, the next item on the agenda are certain rescissions, taking them away, which are policies by and large that NISBA in its audit said we don't really need. And I will, and I should point out that our discussions started off with the recommendations of NISBA and then went from there. The other item, to save some time, are policies for first reading, continuation without change, which we are going to actually have a recommended action on that so that we can just have those taken care of and off the table. If there are any questions about any of the items in 4.2 or 4.3, that would, let me know. If there are any items in 4.4 that anyone thinks should not be continued or have any questions about them, we can talk about them then so we can have them taken care of today if possible.
Great. So that leads us actually then into, as Neil mentioned, 4.3. I'll just quickly run down the first reading of policies recommended for rescission. It's 6111, budget deadlines and schedules, 6112, determination of budget priorities, 6135, contingency budget, 6230, federal funds, 6255, gifts and private grants, and 6300, bonds and tax anticipation notes. So if anyone has any questions regarding those, please follow up with the policy committee, and they will be on the next agenda for waiver of second reading and adoption of policies and or rescissions. So then we will move on to 4.4, recommended action that the Board of Education conduct a first reading of board policies without change, and upon the unanimous vote of all members present, the Board of Education waives the second reading pursuant to policy 2410 and continues the listed policies without change. You will see the list of policies for continuation without change in the public content of the agenda. It's a longer list, so I won't go through it.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. So now we will move into instructional personnel. Recommended action that the Board of Education accepts the part-time instructional personnel resignation of Lisa Flynn, elementary teacher, effective October 23rd, 2020.
So moved.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Right. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the request for an unpaid leave of absence submitted by Allison Rom, teacher, Pierre Van Cortlandt Middle School, effective November 23rd, 2020 through February 12th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose, abstain, motion carries. All right, so now we will move on to donations. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $200 from Eric Kohler and New York Life as a contribution to the Carrie E. Tompkins Elementary School.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. And the second donation, recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $325 from Marissa Warren and Jeremy Reed as a contribution to the Class of 2024 Student Activities account at the Croton Harmon High School.
So moved.
Can I get a second? Neil seconding. All right, on the question? All in favor? Oh, wait. Josh, did you have a question?
Josh, you're on mute. Oh,
There
I
you go.
noticed that this is a donation to the Student Activities Fund. And I am wondering, does this board actually have to approve donations to the Student Activities Fund? Or whether, under what circumstances we would need to do that, because I know that there are regularly fundraisers that clubs do that feed into the Student Activities Fund, and we certainly do not do approvals for those.
That is a good point.
She's on mute, Denise.
Yes, Josh, that is a good point, and I'm not quite sure why it took this route. I do believe, however, that we have previously approved donations to the class, to the graduating class funds. But that was generally only in the fiscal year in which it was received. I will look into that and get back to the board.
So my thought was, my understanding was it because it was parent donations, and it was just that parent donation was specifically for that class activities fund. So that was why we were recognizing it as a donation. But Neil?
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing, and this is something that perhaps we can consider, is if it is a donation to the class, I don't know if that is something that has the same tax deductibility possibility as a donation to the district. And that may be something that may be of concern to the donors. And I certainly would not want to do anything that puts them in a worse position than it should be. And the other thing I was going to note is that when student organizations do fundraisers, they are in essence, then they're not taking donations per se. They're running a car wash, they're washing cars in exchange for money. So I know Josh says not always. So I realize it's somewhat murky in either way, but whatever way is it would be best for the organization and best for the donors is what I would, like to follow up.
I'll definitely follow up with
Just,
you.
I think that one thing that needs to be checked on here is, was the check that was received payable to Croton Harmon Union Free School District? Or was the check that was received payable to the Croton Harmon Student Activities Fund? And
I
think
believe
if the
it
check
was-
payable to Student Activities Fund, I know for a fact that those, from past experience, that those are not tax deductible. We would need to give instruction to the donor that that's the case. if it is to the school, then I don't think the school can transfer money from the school's account to the student activities fund. So sounds like there's some stuff that needs to be followed up on here, Denise.
I believe it was made out to the
I
student
don't know whether
activity fund.
we should go ahead and vote on it or table it until Denise has figured it out.
So, yeah, I mean, would you like us to, do you think we should table it until Denise comes back with more information on that?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
So make a motion.
I'd like to move to table this until we get a little bit more information about the details. But I would like to express our thanks to the donor. We just want to figure out the way to do this that's right, both legally and that meets the needs of the donor.
Second,
Okay. All in favor? Can you guys hear me? All in favor?
I
Can you guys hear me yet in the room? Okay. All in favor?
I
Aye. Oppose, abstain. All right, so we have tabled that motion and we'll hear back from Denise at the next business meeting. But as to echo what Josh said, thank you to that donor and to our other donors as well for thinking of the school district and for supporting our students. So with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. All right, so recommended action that the Board of Education approves all items on the consent agenda.
so moved.
So moved. Second,
Irish
Irish
vote.
seconds. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain. Whoa,
wait,
yes.
wait,
Oh, sorry.
wait.
I'm sorry, you're right. Yes, no, on the question.
Yeah, let's at least look at it.
Sorry, so sorry. I was getting in the groove there.
I'm done looking.
Okay. Everyone all set? All right, all in favor? Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. All right, so now we will move into the closing of the meeting. So next up, we would have hearing of the public. Are there any public in the community room? Okay, so moving on, we will now move on to board reports. We'll start off with audit committee.
Audit committee was originally planning on meeting today, but it's been postponed and we will be meeting at a later date and we'll have more to report at that time.
Advocacy, Andrea?
Is she talking to her?
Yeah, Andrea, do you have anything for advocacy?
Hi, sorry, couldn't hear you. Yeah, so Sarah and I went to the Westchester Putnam advocacy meeting where they were identifying the issues for 2021. I have to say, it's just interesting where we are tonight because there's a lot that's happening in the federal government that's really going to affect the ability for any of this to go forward. And, you know, in a way, it was a little premature to meet because so much of the result of COVID has ended up impacting funding. We usually are working more on a state level, but right now we're looking to federal government for funds. So it's kind of a different year. So, and Sarah, you feel free to jump in with any additions that you have, I guess, after I'm done. But, some of the, I'm just going to talk about the general areas. They talked about costly mandates, Of course, schools are particularly vulnerable right now with, we're looking at possibly 20% reductions. We don't, next year, we don't know if we're getting any additional funding. They talked about COVID obstacles, and some of it has to do with like our testing. So they're going to be looking for a waiver for spring 2021 mandated testing. They'd like to adjust APPR evaluations to not include test scores for 2021. Adjust requirements for school accountability status to reduce or eliminate impact of state testing. Allow options for schools to reject usage of polling place. A little late, but at any rate. And this is one thing, direct New York State Department of Health to provide guidance on school district closing metrics. So we had a lot of discussion about that tonight. Yeah, exactly. And permit transportation contracts to be aidable even when the district is remote. So these are all very, practical things. The special act school districts have a variety of issues because they have a different funding structure. And we did earlier this year send that out as part of a resolution to give them support. And then one thing that that's really looking to, and I'm trying to find Denise, oh, there she is, is any extra expenses that we can collect for information, for lobbying information, it would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
And so in terms of one issue that I thought was interesting is that they're suggesting that we might lobby for having a 2% tax cap this year, like a true 2% for every district, because we're really looking at a lot of challenges down the road for all districts. The idea being organized around the idea that if not now, it's going to cause taxpayers a bigger spike down the road, or it's a discussion. But that was it's on their program. And they want, of course, full funding of foundation aid, update foundation aid data and formula, and let's see, and add stable funding for needed student mental health programs and professional development, and provide stable aid-based funding for districts that have initiated pre-K programs, which is not us. And potential federal issues also are the COVID relief, but also to reinstate full SALT deduction. So everybody talked about it and kind of said, well, let's keep our fingers crossed and see what happens in terms of our ability to really go for this. Sarah, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered that beautifully. That was kind of the rundown of the meeting. I think come the next West Putt advocacy meeting, we'll probably be able to provide more information. We'll have a little bit of a clearer picture of what's going on at a legislative level. So that's all for me. Then it moves on to Iris for board development.
Okay, so board development has basically two main areas we wanted to report out on. One was the meeting space for our regular meetings, whether or not we are, what everyone thinks of the remote hybrid, well, it's not hybrid, remote in-person split, and any thoughts or feedback you may have on our meetings. So what we wanted to ask is if everyone could take a look at the last meeting and this meeting and send any feedback to board development, which is Andrea, myself, and Sarah, so we can take a look at if there are any challenges we need to overcome. We want to thank Josh for his input to the board officers and Andrea as well. But again, if there's any basically a little evaluation, a little check on how do you think the meeting structure is going. The second thing we wanted to go through is with our goals. I sent to Andrea and Sarah, we've put together a sort of a little calendar for how we are going to attack our goals this year. And one of the things we wanted to know is, for example, for the next meeting, would the board members be amenable to, we would start the meeting at 7, and from 7 to 7:30, we would dedicate it to our goals. And then the meeting proper would start at 7:30. So what does that mean? So for the first meeting that we were looking at was looking at the question, our goal on equity and inclusion. Oh, I know several of us went to the NYSSBA conference and we sat in on a variety of different presentations, but the thought was to, we would select 1 or 2 of these meetings or videos. All of us would watch it, and then we would come back and discuss what our thoughts were about this topic of diversity, inclusion, and equity in our schools, and start the conversation so that we can begin to figure out how we want to lead the district on this topic. I think in December we were going to look at sustainability. I think Sarah would be leading that. So basically, before each meeting, we would have like a pre-meet where it would be public, of course, videotape, but the point would be for us to do a deeper dive into our goal and further our commitment to those 4 goals in terms of improving our understanding, appreciation, and develop a philosophy that the district could lead by. So if you could give us a thumbs up right now if you're okay with doing an extra half hour, or if that doesn't really work for you, if you could just shoot board development an email so we can get it on the agenda for the next meeting. Again, there's several videos that we will have to choose from. You'd get them about a week in advance to pick from, and then we would just sit down and go through it. Again, our 4 goals are equity, inclusion, diversity, sustainability, the strategic coherence plan, and restorative practices. Andrew?
Iris, would you, well, I just wanted to tell everybody that those goals can be found on our Board of Education page, because it breaks it down a little bit more, because I know we keep talking about them tonight. You can find them right on the page.
Yes, Neil, if you give me just 1 second, because like for one of the things I think it's important, we had the community conversation. The board should probably sit down and have a discussion around what we heard, what we learned, and what our thoughts were, and what we thought we might want to do differently or change. It's just, we should start the process. I'm sorry, can I call on Sarah or Neil?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that 2 things. One is, I think I mentioned to the board in an email, I have downloaded all of the PowerPoints for all of the presentations at the NYSSBA convention. I always do that every year. And the ones that may be of particular interest, either for our discussion or otherwise, are available from me. Secondly, interestingly, there was, looking at the topics of our goals, there were a lot of different presentations on diversity and inclusion issues. Really wasn't very much on sustainability as opposed to prior years, and certainly the other 2 goals we've talked about, not even on restorative justice or, a strategic coherent plan is internal to us. I very much would look forward to that kind of discussion, because I saw some things that I found very interesting. and worthy of our consideration. I have no problem with taking a half-hour chunk to discuss, because the alternative would be a work session devoted to this, which is an appropriate public work session. But doing a half hour at a time, I think makes sense, and I'll make myself available at 7.
Andrea?
I'm just wondering, Iris, if we, would we have an opportunity to maybe even show some of the things or share them with the public? Because some of them were really quite good. I mean, we could talk about that later, but it might be an opportunity for the community to sort of learn along with us. I just add that.
Yeah, that would be great. Because NYSBA is the owner, I think we probably have to get their permission to publicly, especially since our meetings are recorded. But that is something I can definitely look into. Yeah.
Can we get a thumbs up, thumbs down then from Iris with regard to I think this is a good plan. All right, very good. Thank you, Iris.
So yeah, the first one I'm going to shoot for is the work session in 2 weeks. That would be our first, because there are a lot that we'll have to.
All right, Iris, are you done? Okay, now Josh, you're up for communications.
Communications committee will be meeting on the 10th. I believe that's Tuesday. Obviously, we already talked a bit about the biggest thing that was on the communications committee's plate, which was the community conversation on equity and inclusion. I echo Dr. O'Connell's statement. It was a smashing success. I think it was really great how many people were in attendance and the candor with which they spoke. For our public, I mean, one of the questions that was raised several times that I saw after that was it recorded for other people to watch later? And the answer for our public is that no, it was not recorded, and that was done intentionally because there were some folks who might not have been comfortable speaking if it were recorded. However, the district did take detailed notes, and there are obviously things that we're following up on related to that. I have already made some data requests and questions about the procedures in our schools, and I'm sure that others are making similar questions, so I'm really excited about that. So that was the first thing on the communications agenda. Communications, another item that we need to think about a little bit, and this is not just for the communications committee, but with Beth's departure and with our decision now to wait until May to appoint or to have a selection of a seventh board member, that leaves many of our committees, including the communications committee, short on membership. It means the communications committee is now just me and Brian, and I think that and while there is a whole team that meets when we meet as a communication committee, I think this is one where I'm soliciting volunteers. It would be nice to have one more board member to participate in our communications committee meetings.
I nominate Andrea.
Funny, I was just about to nominate you, but
so and we do have a significant set of items on the agenda that are coming up, including we want to do a retrospective on the last couple of major communications that we've done, to see what went well and where we could improve, and where we should be greatly proud. We are going to be continuing discussions on logo and ongoing improvements of the websites, and I think that's the big ones that are on the agenda coming up for communications. And that's all I've got.
Andrea? Andrea, you had a question?
No, I just, I don't know if we want to do this. I'll volunteer to be on the committee.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it. We
I
all
just think
appreciate it.
the communication so far this year has really come through with a different way of a different view, and I kind of like it's kind of nice. And since I was the chair, I kind of felt like it might not be good for me because I may not be able to step back from things that have already been done. So thank you, Andrea.
All right, so now we are up to policy. Neil, I know you spoke before about policy items that you guys discussed. Did you have anything else to bring us up to date on?
Nothing new to report. We will need to schedule another meeting. Part of the issue is that this is a committee that involves all three central office administrators, and it's a question of timing to get everybody available. But I will try to get something done on the calendar as soon as we can.
Great, thank you. All right, so that is all of our committees, and we will move on to polling of the board. Before I open it up to all of you, I have a few items for polling that I just want to get off my plate here. The first up was one I actually should have mentioned during my president's report, and that was to highlight that the New York State Education Department has released detailed data about the performance of all public schools, their dashboard. And we are thrilled to share that the Croton-Harmon School District has received several excellent scores, ranging from academics and social emotional learning and class size and accountability. So that dashboard is up. You can find it on our website. It will link you right to the New York State dashboard. It's a great little tool. I spent some time last week perusing through not just Croton-Harmon, but comparing it to other school districts. There's a lot of data and a lot of good stuff you can glean there. So I did want to note that for all of you and for the community. Next up, I will, and speaking of volunteers for committees and task forces, we do have two new committees. We have the Athletic Study Committee that Mr. Galino has recommended that requested that a school board member serve on. And then we also have the Equity Stakeholder Task Force Committee. So I'm looking for volunteers for each of those. Andrea, you're raising your hand. What are you raising your hand?
Hi, I'm not volunteering. I have a question.
I was like, wow.
Maybe I will, but I just need to know have this question answered, which is, and it's so it was so exciting that we're starting with this equity task force. But when I started, I went to the first Culture of Respect meeting, and I think starting last year, they were sort of thinking that they'd be taking on that role. I'm not sure if that part of Culture of Respect is going to be segueing into, I'm just wondering, maybe John, you could help us with that, or maybe that's a follow-up question, because I'm just curious how that's all going to work. Because it would make sense to have it, I don't know, have those two goals, have those two efforts in the same place.
I think that there's, good work certainly going on with the current work that I certainly want to respect. I certainly think that there's going to be a lot of places where their efforts are going to want to start to dovetail, but I certainly wouldn't want to supplant everything just by assumption. I think it's a good question to pose to Culture of Respect, and really sort of follow their lead. And if it makes sense to sometimes even perhaps co-meet, that's certainly one path to do, and figure out where we can coalesce, but also respect that I think that there is some specialized work that we certainly wouldn't want to, I said, supplant.
And we also spoke with Natalie early on if you remember, John, in, I believe, August, when we met with her the first time, and we told her about our Culture of Respect Task Force, and that their work would be moving into the equity and inclusion piece as well. And, as we've come to know Natalie, she's really like, well, let's, see where they can come together and strengthen each other. She was so positive. So I see it as really, something that will benefit greatly. And don't forget the 2 chairs of the Culture of Respect this year, both Michael Plotkin and Laura Duback. So they are in such key spots to make sure that we weave everything together. And I have to say, I go back to my earlier statement, even being with the kids and them seeing how it's weaving all together. It just felt so powerful. So thank you, Andrea, for bringing it up. I see it as just strengthening both, and where there's opportunity to join, that's great, but it could also, continue in their own vein as well.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm not asking for anyone to necessarily volunteer themselves right at this moment, unless you are really jumping at the chance. You can think it over and email me. But I will move now on to, I think Neil had his hand up first, and then Iris, and then Josh. Did I see you had your hand up? Okay, so Neil, Iris, Josh.
I just want to say very quickly that you did not mention the bus electrification task force, and I just thought I should say that I have agreed to take on that board liaison or participation responsibility, and I don't think that I should take on one of the other 2.
Yep. And you're right. I hadn't mentioned that because I thought we had mentioned it at the last one, and you were volunteering for it. So that one was done. All right. Iris.
Well, you said email you. I was just going to say I have a connection to both of those, and so athletics is something that my kids were athletes in the district, and so I feel I could be valuable there. And equity and inclusion, it's something I'm also interested in. So I can help out with either of those.
Sorry. Now I'm unmuted. If anyone else has an interest in those, please just email me and Brian. And now Josh, and then Andrea.
I was just going to say, put my name down for diversity. I'm available for that.
Andrea?
And I just wanted to say, I'm looking forward to sort of being connected with the diversity via Culture of Respect, because I'm working on Culture of Respect. So.
Oh,
great. Iris? Go ahead, Iris.
sorry. Just as Andrea had mentioned to me whether I would be interested in co-joining her on Culture of Respect, and if I just wanted to bring it up with the rest of the board to see whether or not anyone would have a problem if I were to go in. There would be 2 board members as a result on that committee.
No problem.
All right. Great. So then I think that sorts out committees. Did anyone else have anything on that topic? All right. I think that was it in terms of my items for polling of board. I mean, we have the NYSBA conference to discuss. I did attend. I'm sorry, Josh.
I'm sorry. Before we move on to NYSBA, I attended the Student Faculty Congress at CHHS last Wednesday and yesterday. The Student Faculty Congress is, their first meeting was last Wednesday. And they started out by, getting used to the online meeting format. Well, it's something that we do all the time. and they've been doing in the form of their classroom environment, of a teaching environment and a learning environment. That's a lot different from participating in a collaborative online meeting. And it's especially difficult when you realize that that's a collaborative online meeting that has 3 times more people in it than this one does. So they're working through how to do online meetings with, of Student Faculty Congress, which is a large body with that many folks. They are selecting topics to pay attention to, and have started with the planning of a Student Faculty Congress retreat, which is going to be taking place later this month. I look forward to being the liaison, continuing to be the liaison there, and I'm going to be doing some training work on how to do collaborative online meetings with them based on my personal experience there.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Andrea?
The CET Building Planning Council meeting is next week, and I filled in for Beth last week, well, last one, because I was on it last year. It was like a last minute thing. So I just wanted to bring it up to the board to find out if anybody wanted to do it. I can continue, but if somebody would like to do it, I put it out there. It's like 2:45 on Thursday, which I can do. So I'm, if the board's fine with me going ahead, I'll continue in that role. Okay.
I don't mind splitting it with you. It's just next Thursday I can't. So if you can let me know the next one after that, I can see if I can do it.
That would be great, Iris. It's nice for them to see a couple of board members too, I think.
Thank you, Andrea and Tyrus. I actually, which triggers my memory that we had the PVC Building Planning Council meeting this afternoon. So our items on our agenda today, we're talking about health and safety, the health and safety protocols that the school is following, how they have managed when we've had COVID positive cases. We've had 2 at the building. So that was our first topic for today. Next week, we will be discussing advisory and social emotional learning, and how the new advisory schedule this year, which includes a weekly advisory during the Wednesday all remote day, how that's working for the students, whether, how that's meeting their needs. And so that will be the focus of our next meeting. Neil?
Sure. First, I attended the high school building planning council today. I think I already described that earlier during the superintendent's report. But I guess we had a relatively small attendance, but they will be moving forward with developing a pulse survey, or a series of pulse surveys for high school students to provide input as to the learning environment this year and social emotional issues. I guess if it's all right, I will segue to NYSSBA and the convention. As the board knows, I attended the pre-convention law conference, and I forwarded to board members and administration the handouts and materials that were provided to the participants, and also a memo setting forth notes, or my notes concerning each of those discussions. As you can imagine, everything was COVID related from all of the participants, except for the discussions about new laws or new court cases that have come up in the last year. I also want to report that I represented the district at the business meeting of NYSSBA, which was done remotely. And when Josh talks about running a meeting of 20, 30, or 40 people, they had 225 participants, plus the, at maximum, plus obviously the resolutions committee and the president and Jay Warona as the, I guess, overseer process, et cetera. And they had an outside organization that they hired to run it. All of the resolutions that were recommended for adoption by the resolution committee were adopted. We had one area in which we had said we would support a resolution with an amendment. That amendment was submitted by the Ardsley School District, but since for some reason the Ardsley representative did not actually move that, so I did. Since he did not, that was adopted as an amendment to that provision that dealt with distance learning and the fact that we did not want distance learning to supplant instruction from, within our schools, but we wanted it to supplement and enrich. As the meeting went on and it got later and later, the number of participants dwindled so that we didn't deal with everything, but the two resolutions that we were supporting, that were one that was sponsored by Ardsley and the other one that was introduced by Pleasantville, were defeated in a relatively close vote, each of them like 45% in favor, 55% opposed, or 48% in favor, 52% opposed. But and those dealt, as you will recall, with, I guess you'd put it, encouraging competition, although we didn't really mean competition, between and among BOCES in non-instructional services and BOCES and non-BOCES providers. The discussion was spirited. I participated, as I always do. And that was, those were both defeated, as I said. And then Mr. Warona said, well, it looks like we have fewer than 200 people. We don't have a quorum. We're closing the meeting. Everybody go home or go wherever. And that's how it ended. So there were a few later resolutions that were put in at the last minute. We didn't get to them. I just want to add also for NYSBA, I mentioned that there are, I have all of the materials. If people want any of those PowerPoints or other materials that were posted for each of the sessions. And it would be appreciated, and I know I discussed this, I think, with Iris or somebody, that if there are particular videos that we as board members would like to view, not only the ones that we're going to view as part of our goal setting, that we should see if we can arrange to have that for board members, or at least the board members who were participants and signed up for the convention. This is probably a lot of things that I didn't get to see, or that others didn't get to see, that would be of use and would be important for us. And I think we should get, be able to do that if we can.
So Neil, to that point, the NYSBA convention platform, so that PSAV platform that they use to run the convention, is open. It was for 30 days following the conclusion of the convention. They would be available on that platform. NYSBA has stated that those videos and the materials from the convention will be available until December 31st. So what I don't have an answer as of yet as to what they will be, how they will be collating all of that information after the platform shuts down in 30 days. But I will get that information from NYSBA. I was actually asked by one of the NYSBA members to participate in a small group roundtable with other school boards that is coming up in a couple of weeks. So I'll be participating in that, but I'll reach out to Mr. Bieber in the meantime to get information on when they'll shift things off of that platform and onto their own platform. So Andrea, you had raised your hand.
Well, the videos are up, so you can see them now. But the one that I really wanted to bring attention to was the one on budgeting during COVID. It was really excellent information, and a lot of it, and in fact, now that I'm on the communications committee, I can bring it to them, but it's there's a lot about how we have to get out the door with early communications to really bring the community along and let them really understand what we're facing, because there's going to be a lot going on. So, you know, maybe that's something I would recommend even that our administrators take a look at it, if we can arrange for that, just to see about some of their suggestions about how to reach out to the public. And I will say too that I was thrilled to see that best practices, when they were going through best practices, we really follow almost all of them. I'd say all of them actually. So it's really reassuring to see it. And then it's also very helpful in terms of trying to develop a timeline around the next budget.
Iris, did you have your hand raised? No. Okay, so does anyone else have any comments with regard to the NYSBA convention? Right, as Andrea said, all of the videos are posted up on that platform. So everyone who was participating, you can go check out the videos that you missed, the presentations you missed. I did want to also highlight that the week of November, I think it's November 16th. Yes, so the week of November 16th, West Putt will be hosting a series of different webinars at, there's some at like 9 a.m. a few days that week. There's one every day, one or more than one at noon. And then again, a couple of nights that week, there will be some at 6 p.m. They're on a variety of different topics. They're open to all board members, and I do believe administration as well. So I would highly suggest that you take a look at those different. I've already signed myself up for several lunchtime webinars to listen to as I eat my lunch. So there are a lot of very relevant, pertinent topics to us with regard to budgeting and COVID and socially distant board meetings. There's a lot of relevant information, and I think it would be good for people to attend if they can. All right, does anyone else have anything for polling of the board? Iris.
I just have a quick reminder, the Black Cow, so that it doesn't slip away. If we could just keep that on our tickler to try and see if we can set up another offering so the community can connect with us.
Josh, we can't hear you at all.
That was me excoriating myself for forgetting to set up a virtual Black Cow before this meeting. I will set one. I think we need to set it up. I think it actually worked fairly well the last time we did it, the virtual. So I think we'll get one on the calendar for roughly 2 weeks from today.
Great. And if we can plan out with communications, if I could just ask communications to sort of plan that out. If we want to maintain them as virtual for right now for the rest of the year, we just plan them out and we can set up a sign up sheet and get that around to everybody. So that we aren't sort of all at the last minute trying to scrabble and make sure we have people available. So.
Yeah, I think I'll set that up as so that we'll just schedule them out all the way out till like February at least.
Perfect. Thank you. All All right, anything else for polling? Okay, so now we will move on to items needed for the next Board of Education meeting. So our next Board of Education meeting will be the work session, November 19th. As Iris noted, we are going to try and plan for to start at 7 p.m. so that we can discuss the videos, the equity, inclusion, equity, and diversity videos that Iris will send out, or board development will send out to everyone. And then the work session itself will be to sort of get an update and come back to where we had last left off the turf field discussions back. Seems like several lifetimes ago, but last spring that we were discussing and sort of get an update on where we were then, how things have, how that maybe has changed, and what we should look forward to. So if you have questions, thoughts, things that you're looking for with regard to that, please send them to Brian and I. I would ask you, and I will get the information for that. Actually, Tracy very nicely provided it. The presentation from last February, or this was just this February, the presentation from February that we discussed it. And if you could take a look at that presentation and perhaps take a look at that work session video as well from February 27th, 2020 in preparation for the meeting, that would be very helpful for everyone. Any questions? All righty, so then that brings us to adjournment. All right, recommended action that the Board of Education adjourn the meeting at 9:56 p.m.
So moved.
All right, it appears Iris is seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely night, and we'll talk soon.
Sarah,
Thanks.
can you hold 1 second?
Certainly.